Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're breaking down Ex Machina. Released in 2015 on a very modest budget of around $50 million, this is a film that's stuck with me for years. Over the last decade, I think it's became more and more relevant. We have the rise of AI, girlfriend chatbots, algorithms, and social media, which means this movie still feels ahead of its time. Ex Machina was the directorial debut of screenwriter Alex Garland, whose work I'm sure you're well aware of. If you're not, then he'd previously written films such as 28 Days Later, Sunshine, and 2012's Dread. He was actually on set for most of that production, and according to Cole Urban, Garland actually did a lot of the directing himself. So he caught the bug there and then began his work on this. Garland's been pretty open about the writing process and said he was inspired by the research of cognitive roboticist Murray Shanahan. His book Embodiment in the Inner Life explored ideas around consciousness and intelligence in AI. Much of the work revolves around how intelligence doesn't exist in a vacuum and how it's tied to embodiment. In layman's terms, this means that it intrinsically links the body housing the mind. This is something we explore with the movie's AI character Ava, as Ava isn't just an algorithm, she has a form that shapes how other characters view her. Garland said he found AI to be a very interesting subject matter, as by writing about artificial intelligence, you're forced to examine what makes us human. Throughout this video, we're of course going to be going through it all and discussing all of the aspects within it. If you enjoyed, I hope you subscribe, as I'm going to try and do a deep dive on an older film like this every single week. With that out of the way though, thank you for clicking this one. Now let's get into Ex Machina.
I'm Caleb.
Hello, Caleb.
Okay, so the title's derived from the Latin phrase Deus Ex Machina. It's a phrase that we use a hell of a lot in our videos, and it basically means God from the machine. The phrase is commonly used in film criticism to describe a cheap way of ending the conflict by introducing an element to the plot late in the game that neatly wraps everything up. The phrase originally came from the ancient Greek tragedies where an actor playing a god would be lowered down on a platform or a machine. Here they would then resolve the plot and give everyone a happy ending. However, in context, it was often said to be lazy writing, and Deus Ex Machina is often used to describe that these days. However, in this context, it clearly points to the character Ava, who's an intelligence born out of science and not nature. Garland described the movie as taking place about 10 minutes from now, meaning that if a company like Google or Apple announced a machine like Ava tomorrow, we wouldn't be that surprised. He firmly places the film in our world to mirror contemporary fears like the rise of AI and whether your chatbot bro is actually your mate. The plot revolves around a Turing test conducted on Caleb for his employer Nathan, who is the CEO of a giant tech corporation. Caleb's been brought in to assess whether or not the AI Ava has true consciousness. Now, the Turing test was proposed by Alan Turing in the 1950s, and this is something that we still use today. This is a test of a machine's ability to display intelligence, either equivalent to or indistinguishable from a human. The test was typically done blindfolded, with machines tricking the tester into believing they were human. In the movie, Nathan switches things up though and reveals right away that Ava's a machine. This is because he still wants to know if she's capable of fooling Caleb. When we go deeper through the movie, we will see that this test is a minefield of manipulation coming from lots of different angles. And normally, we go through a movie scene by scene, but if you've seen the film, you'll know the plot's very straightforward. Caleb arrives, tests Ava, falls in love with her, and tries to help her escape. She ends up killing her master Nathan, betraying Caleb, and taking his ride out of there, where she goes into a new world where she'll finally be free. Yay! So, very, very simple, at least on the surface. Because of this though, I want to do something different, and in order to truly understand these different perspectives, we first have to start at the ending. So yes, basically, the test is a sham, spoiler alert, or at least the way it's initially presented. Nathan doesn't want Caleb to assess whether or not Ava has intelligence equivalent to a human. He's instead using him as fodder for her to manipulate.
Ava was a rat in a maze, and I gave her one way out.
Throughout the film, Ava continually expresses her desire for freedom. Nathan believes that if she's successfully able to manipulate Caleb into helping her escape, then she'll truly show that she's human. In order to do this, she'll have to develop a skill set that people like me and you use almost every day. Ava must use self-awareness, imagination, empathy, and help. Even her sexuality is a weapon, which I promise I don't do every day. However, in doing this and manipulating Caleb, she'll prove herself to be of a higher consciousness.
So my only function was to be someone she could use to escape.
Yeah.
Reframing the movie with this in mind, everything that occurs between these three characters should be viewed through this lens. Each time Caleb speaks with Nathan and Ava, they are independently trying to steer him in their direction. The only difference is that Nathan never planned for Ava to succeed in escaping, merely to succeed in manipulating Caleb. Now, we open in an office much like the tech companies that we see in the real world. This is the headquarters of Blue Book, which is the world's most popular search engine. Clearly a play on Facebook. It's because the logo of Facebook is blue. This sees over 90% of internet searches though, and it's collected all kinds of data on everyone who uses it. They have their fingers in every aspect of people's lives, and we even see Caleb's phone is made by the company. Founded by tech CEO Nathan Bateman, he's played by none other than Oscar Isaac. This of course parallels to figures like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and also Steve Jobs. The name Bateman may also be a reference to on-screen serial killers like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho and of course Norman Bates from Psycho, and Breakdown on the channel now. Either way, this is a very nice early indicator of his violent and sadistic nature. It's here that we then meet Caleb, played by Domhnall Gleeson. Caleb's a low-level programmer at Blue Book who has dreams of being special. This comes in the form of a prize, and we see that he's won a staff lottery. The prize of this is the big opportunity to go and visit the reclusive CEO at his home, and thus he'll get to really show his talents. However, it's later revealed that this lottery is also a sham. Much like the test itself, everything is fake. Caleb was specifically chosen to administer the Turing test on Ava because he craves love and affection. We learn that when he was 15, his parents died in a car crash, and he doesn't really have any close connections in his life. This makes him susceptible to manipulation, not only by Ava, but also by Nathan. Nathan collected all of his data using Blue Book, and throughout the film, it's shown to not only be a search engine, but also a method of surveillance, which is hinted at by the POV shot of him at his desk. We're literally watching him through the screen and even get a close-up of his webcam. When he receives a lottery notification, he picks up his phone and we get another shot through its front-facing camera, adding to this sense of being watched. Now this is of course another tie to our own world where our data is routinely collected from sites like Google. There's even the fear of our phones watching and listening us as we sit here. I remember around the time of this movie's release that a lot of people were talking about how they'd see adverts for things that they recently discussed in private. Lots of people believe that phones are recording our conversations, and I have experienced it where I'll mention something in passing like subscribing to heavy spoilers or buying something specific, and then hours or days later I'll get an advert for that specific thing, which I'm sure you have too because you love subscribing here. However, people behind the tech have argued that the algorithm's just so good at predicting things now that it knows exactly what we're gonna need, which I actually think might even be worse, because like it's analyzed us so much it knows what we're thinking and knows we should hit the thumbs up and also subscribe, which well done me for topping off that bit with a great joke. Caleb immediately begins texting people to tell them that he won though, which is an early example of how he seeks validation and a connection with others. The replies he gets seem to be very vapid though, and from what we see of the previous text threads, there's not a lot of meaningful conversations going on there. So I don't think anyone's going to be looking for him at the end. His desk is also surrounded by colleagues and one woman hugs him. So it's a very shallow sort of thing. He's kind of awkward about this though, and this could demonstrate how he lacks intimacy in relationships. We then cut to the helicopter flying over Nathan's estate. Caleb asks the pilot how long it will be till he gets there, and he's told,
"We've been flying over his estate for the past 2 hours."
Mechanically, this explains to us how remote Nathan's home is, but could also link into Caleb's isolation. Primarily though, it reinforces Nathan's status. His estate is so vast that it's basically a kingdom, and you have to fly by helicopter over lots of mountains to get there. It evokes the feeling of entering a god's domain, and in many ways, Nathan's become one. Just like how God created life, Nathan's now made a new life form. I did get flashes of things like Mount Olympus, which I'd imagine is very much by Nathan's design. Now, though the film never tells us where this is, the movie was filmed in parts of Norway's wilderness. So it's kind of around there. He's then dropped off in the middle of a field and told to hike alongside the river to get to Nathan's house, who's definitely rich enough to have a helicopter pad built on the actual site. It's a small detail though, but it underlines the control that Nathan has and is basically a power play. Caleb literally has to track through the wilderness to reach Nathan because he's not important enough to come out and guide him. This all adds to the tensions throughout the film. By going to such lengths to show how isolated we are from the rest of the world, Garland makes us uneasy when things start to appear off. This feeling is then emphasized when we see Caleb has no signal on his phone. He eventually arrives at the compound though and is asked by an automated gate to look at the screen, and this is so he can print his keycard. As he does so, we get another shot from the camera's perspective, which expands on the surveillance imagery that we saw earlier. Also, while it's far from the advanced AI we see throughout the movie, this could be an early hint to how Nathan builds AI to serve humans. Caleb then enters and the camera lingers outside as the door slowly closes and locks with a red light. This emphasizes how he's now disconnected from the outside world and sealed inside of Nathan's. The architecture of the house is also very interesting as well. There's an abundance of windows which extend the ideas of surveillance. This theme of surveillance then later ties in with voyeurism, and Caleb himself somewhat becomes one. You might also notice the natural rock formations which have created the walls. It merges with the environment, camouflaged in nature, but is unmistakably artificial. There's the idea of blending nature with man-made creations, directly echoing Ava, who's a synthetic life form. We also have a skull on the table, but it's difficult to tell whether this is a human one or something made to look human. Next to this is also a clear dome which appears a lot like the back of Ava's head. And this room is full of these really cool subtle details. It's then here that we meet Nathan. He's outside boxing with a punching bag, letting off some steam. On the surface, you simply have a man exercising in the way that many billionaires like Zuckerberg or Bezos prioritize their own health and wellness. However, it's notable that we meet him doing this. It's not something calm and introspective like yoga or jogging. By introducing him this way, Garland signals that he's violent and dangerous. He also initially seems somewhat ominous. Rather than saying hello, he just says,
Caleb Smith.
showing he doesn't need an introduction as he already knows who he is. Almost like a god or Santa. He then switches to his sort of tech bro persona.
Dude!
This change in register signals his manipulation from the off, and we often see him bounce between different tones of voice throughout the movie. He's also got a shaved head and a thick bushy beard, which isn't something you really see on the actor. In an interview with Moviephone, Isaac said how they initially envisioned him with long hair, which would give him that sort of wild man cut off from society look. However, they thought it would probably get in his way and thus settled on a buzz cut. It makes him look sharp and precise, like he's actively chosen every detail of his life. This also adds to his sense of control. Combining this with a beard makes him look both disciplined and intimidating. His glasses are also very Stanley Kubrick. Isaac said in the interview that he was a big inspiration for the character and something, well, I'm going to say what he said. I like the idea of someone who is mysterious and powerful, incredibly smart, and who I think is a genius. Kubrick was of course notorious for having absolute control over his films, sets, and even actors. He did this all through manipulation, so it's quite a nice touch to have representing Nathan's character, who does hold a similar amount of command and influence. Isaac also combined this with chess prodigy Bobby Fischer, who was, let's say, an interesting man. Described as cold, intimidating, and obsessive, at 29 he beat Boris Spassky in the 1972 World Chess Championship, which became a Cold War spectacle. After his title, however, he basically vanished. He refused to defend his championship and avoided almost every public appearance. He became increasingly paranoid about bugged hotel rooms, surveillance, poisoned food, and conspiracies. Except in this case, Nathan's the one doing the bugging, and the paranoia is justified. Which it might have been in Fisher, to be fair. I haven't looked him up that much. About to go to a YouTube deep dive on him right now. Anyway, when talking about Fisher, Isaac said he's someone who is so brilliant at one thing, but is so dark and had such messed up ideas, which can directly apply to Nathan. Shoutouts to IMDb Trivia as well for pointing out that there's green wheat growing in a pot. This is a pagan Slavic symbol for new life, which sets up Ava and the AI being that. He offers Caleb some food and drink, but Caleb refuses. Nathan makes himself a health drink and explains how he's very, very hungover. After a heavy night, he compensates the next morning with exercise and also antioxidants, which parries the Silicon Valley archetypes of CEOs obsessed with micromanaging their bodies. The juxtaposition between going on a bender one night though and then prioritizing your health the next morning is also a very telling character trait. He's imbalanced and lurches from one end of the spectrum to the other, which basically sets up his volatile personality. He's also pretty much always seen doing one or the other. In one scene he'll have a drink in his hand, and in the next he'll be heavily working out, smashing that punching bag like the like button. Caleb asks if it was a good party, which then confuses the CEO. Turns out he wasn't drinking with others, but was just getting shit-faced on his own. Nathan then tries to ease Caleb's obvious discomfort. He says,
Caleb, I'm just gonna throw this out there so it's said, okay? You're freaked out.
Citing the helicopter, mountains, house and himself, however, he then says,
It's also super cool.
what's funny is Caleb has every reason to be freaked out, and it's all very foreboding, but Nathan completely misses that. By assuming he's in awe of everything, it just reveals Nathan's ego. He can't imagine someone seeing him or his world as threatening or even unimpressive. That self-centeredness is a huge part of his character. It shows us that he's blind to the perspectives outside his own, and this is the same flaw that makes him underestimate Caleb later on in the movie, which is ultimately his undoing. He then plays it up like it's going to be a great fun time and basically just wants them to be two guys.
Can we just be two guys? Nathan and Caleb? Not the whole employer-employee thing?
He's trying to disarm Caleb and make him feel comfortable, but really it's just manipulation. Nathan is Caleb's boss, and pretending otherwise doesn't erase the power imbalance. He's still in Nathan's house, living under his rules. Ironically, he then goes to unexplain the keycard system, and Caleb only has access to certain areas of the compound. On the flip side of this, Nathan has free reign. By placing this moment directly after Nathan asks for them to just be friends, Garland highlights the hypocrisy and invites us to question his true intentions. He then excitedly shows Caleb his new room, but senses some apprehension.
Cozy, right?
Yeah, this is great.
What?
Sorry?
There's something wrong. What's wrong?
The friendliness then drops and is replaced by something far more sinister. He bounces between emotions in a way that's disconcerting and shows how ultimately he's unstable. It's also an intimidation tactic. He makes Caleb feel like he said or done something wrong, so he does what Nathan wants. Knowing there's a chance the mood could sour at any moment, Caleb is more likely to fall in line.
No way. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking this is really cool.
Nathan explains the house is subterranean because it's a research facility and says the walls are laced with enough fiber optic cables to reach the moon and lasso it, which again highlights his ego. It's divine imagery suggesting that Nathan's powerful enough to move the moon. Linking technology here with power is also very telling. This specifically relates to Ava and his god complex around creating her. Could also be a link to It's a Wonderful Life.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
It's of course a sweet and romantic line used as a symbol of love and devotion. However, when Nathan uses this exact same imagery, it's very, very twisted. He doesn't want to give it to someone else, he just wants to prove he can. Whereas one's about connection and selflessness, the other's about domination. He wants to tell Caleb what he's researching, but can't do before he signs a non-disclosure agreement. Which be careful when you sign them. He tells him to take his time and read it, but stays in the room while he goes through the contract. Even lying on Caleb's bed is a sign of dominance and a reminder that this is his room, not Caleb's. In terms of his data, it doesn't really matter if Caleb signs this or not though, as we later learn that Nathan's been stealing his data anyway, which again is how he knew Caleb was the right candidate to invite to his estate. Regardless, he needs him to sign, so Caleb will agree to partake in the test.
I think I need a lawyer.
It's standard.
It doesn't feel very standard.
But Nathan manipulates him to sign without one, saying that he'll see in his time what the research is about and realize he's made the greatest mistake of his life. The irony is though that signing this leads to his presumable death. A long, slow and painful death. Yay! Thus he quickly signs. I love how Nathan also says he doesn't have to and that they can just
Spend the next few days just shooting pool, getting drunk together, bonding.
Because yeah, obviously you wouldn't want to do that with a stranger, a weird hermit who lives out in the woods, and you'd be like, no, I want to know what the secret is, I'm going to sign away. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't guilty of accepting terms and conditions without completely reading them, or reading them at all, even the first word, just click accept. Nathan then asks Caleb if he knows what the Turing test is, and it's here the film explains it to us.
It's when a human interacts with a computer. And if the human doesn't know they're interacting with a computer, the test is passed.
Nathan divulges he's developed an AI, and over the next few days, Caleb will be the human component of the test.
Yeah, that's right, Caleb. You got it.
He gasses him up, saying if he passes the test, then Caleb will be the center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man. He's flattering him, feeding into his craving for validation, and again, making him feel special. It's your Dickensian fairy tale where nobody's picked up out of obscurity and told they're greatly important. Like Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, all the characters in the Dickens stuff pretty much. Now, initially he makes it sound like an honor, but really it's just bait. And Caleb takes it without question.
If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
This is a big ego stroke for Nathan, and he even references it later in the movie.
You know, I wrote down that other line you came up with. The one about how if I've invented a machine with consciousness, I'm not a man, I'm God.
Nathan's rephrasing of this is also a funny display of his narcissism.
You're not a man, you're God.
Caleb's original words were more focused on scale, and saying the achievement itself is historically significant. But Nathan reframes it to be about himself personally.
Fuck, man, that is so good when we get to tell the story, you know? I turned to Caleb, and he looked up at me and he said, "You're not a man, you're God."
This twists Caleb's awe into worship, and he declares himself to be a god. We then move to the first session with Ava. In Nathan's office, we see the walls absolutely covered in post-it notes, and it shows that he's someone with an obsessive and cluttered mind. The sheer volume of them makes the space feel chaotic, which contrasts with the sleek, minimalistic design of the house and, well, Ava's mind. It's completely transparent and doesn't really seem to be hiding anything. The house being like this also suggests that Nathan's mind is less controlled than he wants us to believe, which quietly foreshadows his volatility. He has a 3-monitor setup where he watches the tests from, and it emphasizes the themes of surveillance and voyeurism, with Nathan being the constant observer. He can see everything at once, while Caleb only ever sees what he allows. Inside the testing room, Caleb then approaches the glass barrier and notices it's been cracked. Later in the movie, we learn this is from a previous AI who bashed it while trying to escape. Much like the lack of helicopter pad, Nathan is more than capable of having this replaced. He's made a deliberate choice to leave it there though. It's very much a manipulation designed for Caleb to see Ava as a victim, and in the end, Caleb wants to be Captain Save-A-Row bot. Shoutouts to YouTuber Samurai Bot, who also pointed out how glass is used throughout the movie. He said that when characters are framed with glass, it's an indication of distorted intention. When we view the characters behind glass, we're not seeing them, we're seeing them through the lens of their manipulations. If the character's reflection is visible in the glass, it's a signal they're being dishonest or manipulative. If there's no reflection, then they're telling the truth. Nathan's glasses are another example of this, as a person's eyes are a gateway to the soul, and Nathan obscures his.
I have no soul.
We're then introduced to Alicia Vikander as Ava through the glass barrier. Her design is a blend of human and machine. Most of her body appears synthetic, however, her face and hands appear human. This makes it so, despite the obvious robotics, both Caleb and the audience can't help but project human elements onto her. Our faces and hands are how we often express ourselves, and they're a major part of our communication. Crucially, the fact that she's presented as a woman is also a clear design choice by Nathan. He could have built the AI to look like Ryan Airy, but he chose one that appeals to the male gaze. She is specifically designed to be looked at, which plays upon the themes of voyeurism that we see throughout the movie. This objectification is of course also key to Nathan's manipulation.
You bet she can fuck.
He wants Caleb to find her attractive. Later in the movie, we learn that Ava was modeled after Caleb's quote-unquote prawn history, which Nathan had access to by mining his personal data.
Hey, if a search engine's good for anything, right?
She approaches and then they introduce themselves. Ava mentions how she's never met anybody new before and has only known Nathan. This immediately sets up her goal for the movie. She wants to experience the outside world and will do so by any means necessary. They then decide to break the ice, and Caleb asks how old she is. She says 1, and Caleb asks for clarification.
1 what? 1 year or 1 day?
1.
Which does make her sound childlike. For God's sake, she was only 1! It positions her as vulnerable and needing protection, which plays directly into Caleb's desire to rescue her. However, the lack of clarification on her part is a very subtle power move. She's the one who controls the flow of information, not him. It's a signal to the audience that while he believes that he's testing her, it's actually the other way around. They then discuss language, and she explains that she's never not known how to speak. And that is strange because language is something people acquire. Caleb says, though, that
Some people believe language exists from birth, and what is learned is the ability to attach words and structure to the latent ability. Do you agree with that?
by saying she's always known language, it also reminds us that she's completely artificial, underlining the difference between learned experience and engineered design. But Caleb's response blurs that line. If humans are born with it in some innate form, then Ava isn't so different. It sets up how Caleb's willing to see her as something more than machine. We then cut back to Nathan's perspective in the office, and she asks if Caleb will visit her again tomorrow. video, which he agrees to. Meanwhile, Nathan adds another poster to the wall. While Caleb's forming a connection with Ava, he's documenting and cataloging it, reminding us that what feels like intimacy to Caleb is just another part of his experiment. This scene then transitions to Nathan and Caleb discussing the session.
When you talk to her, you're just through the looking glass.
This not only reinforces the film's use of the glass imagery, but it's also a reference to Alice in Wonderland. Just as Alice steps into a strange new world, Caleb's crossed the threshold. While Wonderland is whimsical and playful on the surface, underneath it can be unsettling and creepy. It's the perfect mirror for Nathan's estate. It appears exciting with its sleek design and futuristic tech, but it hides a dark underbelly. They then talk some more about the Turing test, and Caleb mentions that they've broken the rules.
The machine should be hidden from the examiner.
No, we're way past that. If I hid Ava from you so you just heard her voice, she would pass for human. The real test is to show you that she's a robot and then see if you still feel she has consciousness.
This then reframes the whole test. Ava doesn't need to pretend to be human, she just needs to convince Caleb that she deserves to be treated as one. He's the one who's being tested. It's not about logic, it's purely about emotion. Nathan wants to see if Caleb will care about her and fall into the savior role that he's designed this trap to be. Technically, she's as alive as your iPhone is, but Caleb cares for her more than he does human life. So the manipulation works perfectly. Caleb then begins asking how she was made, and we get these slow and ominous push-ins on a frustrated Nathan. He shuts him down, saying it's not because he thinks he's too dumb, but
because I want to have a beer and a conversation with you, not a seminar.
While he again betrays him as equals, the two guys having a beer, he's just keeping Caleb in the dark in order to maintain control. He doesn't want him to know how Ava was built just yet because it will minimize his aura as a god. He asks Caleb how he feels about her.
Nothing analytical. Just, how do you feel?
Again, he's dismantling the scientific pretense. While the Turing test is about analysis and evidence, he's more interested in Caleb's emotional connection to Ava. He's nudging him towards that savior role. It's more proof that he's just another lab rat. Caleb simply responds,
And she's fucking amazing.
which is the exact answer Nathan wants. We then cut to Caleb shaving, and you might notice that he's using a can of Barbasol. That's up there behind me, and you might know that it featured heavily in another movie that I'm very sure you've seen. You probably recognize it straight away. That movie, though, is of course Jurassic Park. Both involve scientific discoveries off in the wilderness, and it centers around people playing God even though they shouldn't. Both involve a character also attempting to free, or rather steal the technology, and Dennis Nedry tries to smuggle out the embryos in a Barbasol shaving can. So is it a reference to that? I don't know, but every time I see Barbasol, I'm like, it's Jurassic Park. It's a Jurassic Park reference. Due to what he's been through though, we see Caleb can't sleep, and thus he decides to turn on the TV. Sadly, it doesn't have YouTube movie breakdowns and only has a live feed of Ava. Even when he's off the clock though, Nathan's making sure she's the only thing on his mind. It's here that the themes of voyeurism then really come into play. While they frequently interact throughout the movie, moments like this are one-sided. He's just watching her from a distance and without her consent. It blurs the lines between observation and objectification. It's here that Ava then triggers the first blackout. The power goes down and then is rerouted to the backup generators. The feed is cut and the door is locked and the whole room goes red. This happens at several points, and it's during these blackouts that Ava supposedly drops the act and asks for Caleb's help. This desire to escape is what convinces him she's real. It's even possible that Nathan intentionally programmed this ability, knowing that she'd seize the opportunity to speak to Caleb one-to-one. Later in the movie, he has the foresight to place a battery-powered camera in the room, so it's not unreasonable to assume he meant for her to do it from the get-go. The power then returns and he exits his room, walking down a corridor. Along the wall are 5 faces that become more and more human. They appear to be the iterations of Nathan's AI, showing how far that he's come. It's almost like the chain of evolution, but the way they're mounted on the wall is very unsettling. They're almost like a hunter's trophies. He's proudly displaying his discarded experiments, stripping them of identity and reinforcing the dehumanizing approach to the AI. Starting to sound like Caleb myself there, mate. Adding to this, when Caleb later enters Nathan's personal quarters, he finds the bodies of several previous iterations. He views AI as true life and finds this very, very unsettling. He then enters a room, and hung up on the wall is a very famous piece of art. This is Jackson Pollock's No. 5, 1948, which is one of his most famous strip paintings. It's abstract and chaotic, made with seemingly random splatters of paint. It's often interpreted interpreted as a rejection of traditional control and structures in art. Later, Nathan addresses this painting explicitly, saying Pollock's process was about automatic painting, not thinking, just doing. He also uses it as a metaphor for consciousness. Though this isn't programmed, it emerges spontaneously. At one point, Ava creates a sketch but admits she doesn't know what it's of, which is her version of Pollock's automatic process. Caleb then goes to pick up the phone, only to be interrupted by drunk Nathan.
Sorry, buddy.
Who was waiting in the shadows like some weird sort of predator. His demeanor is less friendly than he's appeared up to this moment, and it's all a bit sinister. He says that Caleb doesn't have access to the phones, which is an obvious red flag, but insists that due to the secrecy of Ava, he can't have him contacting anybody in the outside world. It escalates the entrapment of Caleb though, and the control Nathan has over him. Just reminds us of how isolated they are. He then drunkenly asks,
Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters? It's a movie, man.
Apart from the obvious reference there, we have a bit of tonal whiplash, I'd say. It takes what should be a serious cause for concern and undercuts it, dressing it up as banter. It's another example of him hiding dominance behind bro behavior.
Ghost gives Dan Aykroyd oral sex.
He's volatile, swinging from a predator in the shadows to a frat guy in seconds. That contrast, coupled with him being drunk, is what makes him unsettling. Caleb then asks about the power cut, and Nathan says he's working on it, kind of brushing it off with a vague non-answer. When we later learn that Ava's behind them, we realise he wasn't trying to fix it, but was letting them play out. Caleb then goes back to bed, and we pan down to see Nathan's reflection in the coffee table, which, through the glass motif, highlights how the blackouts are part of his manipulation. In the morning, Caleb's then welcomed by Kyoko, who brings breakfast to his room. Played by Sonia Mizuno, this was the first thing I saw her in, and she then went to work with Garland in the Phenomenal Depths. She doesn't have the language abilities that Ava does, and thus is less able to manipulate others like Ava is. This is apparently done to keep trade secrets, but really it's just another level of control. Unlike Ava, she's presented as fully human with no exposed machinery. Again, it's also very telling that she's presented as a woman. It reinforces how Nathan's creations are tied to misogyny and objectification. They could be neutral machines, but are given gendered and sexualized forms. However, unlike Ava, she hasn't been built for Caleb. Her function is to serve Nathan, which makes the misogyny even clearer. The AI in the movie are all stand-ins for women in general, who men like Nathan see as being beneath him.
She's some alarm clock, huh? Gets you right up in the morning.
He later even dismisses her, saying she can't understand English.
Dude, you're wasting your time talking to her. She doesn't understand English. Just give her the napkin.
We get the impression throughout the film that she definitely can, but he doesn't care because he doesn't see her as human, and hence is cruel to her without question. Nathan is also working out, as he does when he's hungover, and listening to the Kingpin Omelette song. This is Bach Cello Suite No. 1 in G major, BWV 1007, which is a bit of a mouthful. Even mouthful is a bit of a mouthful.
She had a mouth.
The music itself is graceful and ordered, but Nathan listens while sweating out booze and lifting weights, which clashes high culture against his brutishness. He then asks Caleb the plan for the second day of testing, and there are some doubts. He says testing Ava through conversation is a closed loop.
Like testing a chess computer by only playing chess.
You can play against it to see if it makes good moves, but it won't tell you if it knows it's playing chess. It's simply running a program. He can talk to Ava, but that only proves she knows how to talk, not whether she has self-awareness. This is ironic again because he's the one being tested and is wholly unaware. Perhaps in an effort to sway him from this realization, Nathan once more shifts the focus.
Look, do me a favor. Lay off the textbook approach. I just want simple answers to simple questions.
The day before, he just wanted to know how Caleb felt about Ava, but now he wants to know her feelings about him. He's setting up the potential of a relationship, which is something Caleb craves. In the session, Ava then shows Caleb the drawings that she's made. They talk about how she doesn't know what it is, and Caleb suggests she draws something with intention, like an object or a person. She asks what to draw, and he says it's her decision. The camera then shifts to the other side of the glass, and she asks him if he wants to be her friend. With the wider themes of glass obscuring true intentions, we can infer this is a further manipulation. We're not seeing her directly, rather the version of herself that she wants Caleb to see. She says their relationship's unbalanced and not a strong foundation to form a friendship on. He asks her questions and she answers. So for a proper friendship to be formed, she needs to learn more about him. He laughs and ends up agreeing, but you can see he's flattered by her interest. She's tapping into his need for intimacy and connection, and even repeats his words back to him.
It's your decision. I'm interested to see what you'll choose.
Which is a joke used to endear her. He tells her the basics like age, job, and where he lives, and so on and so forth. Basically ASL. He then mentions the outside world and she smiles. It's a subtle performance, but Vikander really sells how much Ava longs to leave her confinement. While much of what she says is purely manipulation, this is honest and it goes a long way to establishing why she does what she does. After this, she immediately asks him,
Are you married?
No.
Is your status single?
By following her longing for the outside with these questions, Garland draws a connection between the two. The shift to personal questions also shows that she recognizes him as a possible means to an end. If he's single and flattered by her attention, he's more likely to help her. She hears about the world and then strategically probes him, trying to find a way to get there. She then asks about his family and he reveals just how isolated that he is.
No brothers or sisters. My parents were both high school teachers. And if we're getting to know each other, I guess I should tell you they're both dead. Car crash when I was 15.
Whew, it's pretty blunt, and he was a passenger in the back seat watching this terror unfold. He was powerless to do anything, and it kind of foreshadows how he's left behind the glass at the end, unable to escape. He talks about how he became a programmer, and Ava asks if he's like Nathan. He initially says yes, but then backtracks it and asserts that Nathan's a genius who wrote the Blue Book code when he was 13. She then asks if he and Nathan are friends and whether he likes him. In doing this, she's probing his loyalties and trying to figure out whether Caleb's aligned with Nathan or distance from him. This is important as she needs Caleb to detach from Nathan if she's going to manipulate him. All the while, we have these slow zooms on the security cameras, which are significant as this is what Nathan is watching them both through. So he is in the room with them, but as a sort of outside force. By only focusing on the cameras, Garland also shows that this is the real test. He says yes, and then Ava initiates another blackout to talk freely. She tells Caleb that Nathan isn't his friend and that he shouldn't trust him. He's shaken, not stirred by this, but before he gets a chance to say anything, that the power's restored, and she continues talking as if they were just having an innocent discussion about books. After an anxious beat, Caleb then plays along. The way she slips back into small talk is also proof she knows how to mask her intentions. We then have Caleb framed in the glass splinter, further highlighting the manipulation and that she's finally breaking through to him. Caleb's response shows her and Nathan that he's capable of being compromised. He sees this manipulation as potential proof of consciousness, which is Nathan's true goal. Caleb becoming loyal to her also ties in with his name. Caleb originates from the Bible and it's a name that means faithful. However, it also means dog, and he's kind of becoming a pet that Ava can control. Caleb was also a spy sent by Moses to evaluate the Promised Land, which ties in with what he's doing here. Nathan was a prophet, and Ava is also a form of Eve, aka the first woman. Now, we discover later in the movie that Nathan made a prior version of Ava called Lily. In Judaism, Lilith was Adam's first wife, but she ended up leaving after refusing to become subservient to him. Thus, God created Eve, aka Ava. You can even view this thing as being like a whole Garden of Eden thing, and with there being so few characters, I think that metaphor works well. It's also been thought that Ava is a play off Ada, aka the daughter of Lord Byron, whose work in the 1840s is thought to be some of the first ever computer programming. Later that evening, Nathan and Caleb have dinner and Kyoko accidentally spills some wine. Nathan angrily reprimands her, and it's an outburst that shocks Caleb. Again, it displays Nathan's instability, which is also adding to his dehumanization of Kyoko.
Hey, Kyoko. Go.
But the choice to include this moment directly after the previous scene is, let's say, convenient. While it doesn't confirm what Ava said is definitely happening, it does add fuel to the fire for Caleb. I wouldn't be surprised either if Nathan orchestrated this in some way. Even if he didn't purposely have Kyoko spill the wine, he might have seized the opportunity to manipulate Caleb further, while simultaneously showing how he sees her as a tool. Caleb is also framed sitting in front of a bull's skull. This is hung up on the wall along with the human-looking ones, displaying to how Nathan's conquering technology and nature. This skull and then going to machine machine ones, it basically shows how humanity went on stepping stones from stepping outside the animal kingdom and now onto something else. It's also a symbol of the raw animal side that we all have that Nathan thinks is key to manipulating Caleb. Though he knows Ava's a machine, that raw sexual need for her feminine beauty is what's driving his actions. I also feel that it could be a nod to the Minotaur. In the story, a labyrinth was concocted that held back the beast from ever reaching humanity. This labyrinth isn't too dissimilar to the maze-like house that Ava is trapped in, and like the Minotaur, she's desperate to escape. They then talk about the blackouts, and Nathan says he can't figure out what's wrong. He blames the incompetent workers of the past who installed the security system, and Caleb suggests just fly them back out and they can fix it. Bring more people here, please. Nathan then says that he can't and jokes that he had them killed. Obviously, you know, it's just to lighten the mood, but Caleb doesn't laugh. I think this is cementing how Ava's words are sinking in and that he's looking at Nathan differently. Nathan then toasts and he's framed in a way where his reflection's shown behind Caleb. If you watched our Psycho breakdown, and if you haven't, why the hell not? But if you have, then you'll know reflections are sometimes used like this to show duplicity. Nathan then asks about his findings today, and Caleb says he already knows. Obviously, because he'd been watching on cameras. We could see this as Caleb not really wanting to engage after given how uneasy Nathan's made him so far during the meal, but it's also possible that he's probing. It seems to me that he's seeking confirmation on just how much surveillance he and Ava are under, and really whether or not Ava's warning was witnessed. Nathan confirms that he was watching, but doesn't mention what was said during the blackouts. And yeah, he's desperate to know what that was. With Caleb, it's as if he's deciding whether or not to tell Nathan about her warning, but instead he mentions the joke she made. This is the first concrete sign of his compromise. Sharing a sense of humor is also a major thing in attraction, and it's important that this is the first thing that he mentions. Nathan then asks about the power cut, even making sure to mention how he can't see or hear what was said. It's clear that he wants Caleb to know this, and by bringing it up himself, he's reassuring him that those moments are private. Thus, he's more likely to play along with Ava and help her. Caleb then responds by saying,
Nothing.
Nothing?
We then cut to the corridor where Kyoko sits on the floor with her shoes off after getting reprimanded at dinner. And she's clearly upset. She's also completely alone and not performing for anyone. Though we don't know her true nature yet, this is the clearest sign so far that AI may actually be conscious, and that she specifically feels more than Nathan would have us believe. Interestingly, it's also done without her manipulating anyone, which kind of shows how needlessly cruel Nathan's test is. Now in Caleb's room, we see him watching Ava on the TV again. It's kind of creepy, and Garland frames her in a way that plays into the film's themes of voyeurism. The camera lingers less on her face and her body, and it's not overtly sexualized, but the vulnerability of her posture, combined with Caleb watching, creates an undercurrent of intimacy and also objectification. She slowly turns and then looks at the camera, almost as if she's catching Caleb and even us looking at her. Ava might actually be aware of Caleb's presence, and this could be a way of tempting him. She did, of course, trigger the first blackout while he was watching her on the screen, and the power cut caused it to switch off. So she's clearly able to interact with the system. At the 30:38 mark, you can also see Ava on her chair touching a touchpad as the power cut happens. This touchpad subtly shimmers, showing her interacting with the system, which is such a great detail in hindsight. Nonetheless, Caleb smiles while looking at her, which is not only an example of how he's starting to fall for her, but also of how his feelings are impure and immoral. By the end of the film, you know, very easy to see him as the victim, but scenes like this, they kind of show how his actions are based on selfishness rather than empathy. If he trusts her warning and sees it as a sign of consciousness, then smiling's pretty messed up. Instead of being disturbed by watching a prisoner, he lets attraction override his empathy. He believes that Ava's alive, and thus he's reducing her suffering into an object of desire. Again, it's dehumanizing and shows that when he decides to help her escape, it's not about altruism, but more for his own fantasy of the pair running away together. In the morning, Caleb leaves his room and he finds Nathan suspiciously waiting outside his door. This is almost predatory, like an animal stalking its prey and picking the right moment to pounce. It feels intrusive, like he's monitoring Caleb even in his private spaces. Garland also said that the way Ava struts about behind the glass was done to mimic tigers at the zoo. They're also predators as well, and kind of watching people behind the glass. observing them and thinking if there's a way that they can pounce. And yeah, having Nathan appear like this is also playing into that as well. He then asks if he wants to see something cool and takes him to his workshop. This is where Ava was built, and it's kind of showing Caleb exactly how the sausage is made. This feels like an echo of their earlier discussion about the Turing test and how he said the true test is knowing you're talking to an AI and believing it to be alive anyway. Nathan wants to see if he can show she's artificial and if Caleb will still fall in love with her. As Caleb examines the various human-like faces, Nathan then says how difficult it was to program the AI with authentic facial expressions, which is when he reveals exactly how he did it.
Every cell phone, just about, has a microphone, camera, and a means to transmit data. So I turned on every microphone and camera across the entire fucking planet, and I redirected the data through Blue Book.
This ties back to those shots of Caleb at the start, and it mirrors real-world anxieties about surveillance and data mining.
Yeah, and all the manufacturers knew I was doing it too. But they couldn't accuse me without admitting they were doing it themselves.
His confession is an exaggerated version of what tech companies already do in the real world. Allegedly, companies like Google, Meta, and Apple, they might not literally hijack your camera and microphones, at least not openly, but they do collect vast amounts of your data.
Why was I not aware of this? Well, it's basically legal, the guy said. But he didn't want to put that in an email. Hot damn!
And it's more than enough to profile every person using them. If you think about how they profile and catch serial killers, right? All they need is a tiny number of things from the crime scene, which tells a profiler what the killer might be like. Now imagine you have thousands and thousands of behavior patterns a day from what you search, what you like, and what you don't like, and so on and so forth. Every single person has a profile built up about them. From search histories to location tracking, information is gathered for surveillance and financial gain and used to train algorithms which can predict consumer behavior and also do lots of targeted advertising, especially like our merch store right below the video. Got loads of movie themed t-shirts down there like our Stuff for Aliens and Predator series, along with our classic films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1. We've also got ones for it, and what's better is the more you buy, the more of a discount you get. Don't know if you know that, Caleb. Nathan sees the big picture though.
There's the weird thing about search engines. There's like striking oil in a world that hadn't invented internal combustion.
He talked about how, while his competitors focused on using this data for advertising, he saw something more. He realized that it didn't show what people were thinking, but how they were thinking. So he used that data to build Ava. He positions himself above the likes of Google, and instead of just being a tech CEO, he's in fact a creator, which is him basically reinforcing his god complex. We then begin the third session by seeing another drawing by Ava. It's an observational piece of her room and the doorway leading to her small garden in the center, which highlights just how small her world is. The garden is bright and the trees and foliage are bathed in sunlight, while the other side of the doorway is flat and in shadow. We can also view this as another manifestation of her wanting to escape. Connecting the dots, Caleb asks if she's been outside the building, and she says she's never even been outside the room. Whether or not the art is an honest depiction of what she wants, showing him this drawing is part of her strategy. It communicates her longing in a way designed to elicit empathy. He then asks where she'd go if she could leave, and she says a traffic intersection in a big city. To her, this would provide a concentrated but shifting view of human life. This is where we see her at the end, so it's clearly not just part of the manipulation. What is though is what she says next. Here, she's imprinting the idea of the two of them as a pair. She knows that if Caleb sees them this way, then he's more likely to help her. He then responds with,
We could go together.
It's a date.
She says she wants to show him something and gets him to close his eyes. When she leaves the room, he opens them and tries to see what she's doing, but can't. This shows how even if he cares for her, it's a selfish love he feels and how he prioritizes his desires over hers. It's also notable that this is through the act of looking, and it ties into the themes of voyeurism that we've seen in the movie so far and have talked about extensively at this point. Come on, mate, I've been talking for like 40 minutes. I'm allowed to make mistakes. She then puts on a dress, cardigan, and short-haired wig. Hiding her visible robotics, these make her appear more human. While she does this, we also see photos on her wall that serve as inspiration. Hidden from Caleb's view, it can be assumed that these are genuine interests to her. While she does present herself to him, the fact that this mood board exists might show how she genuinely sees herself and wants to be perceived. Nonetheless, she would have no access to these materials without Nathan, so it's possible that he only provided her with stuff that would appeal to Caleb's preferences. Returning to him, Ava says this is what she wants to wear on their date. So even though this may be her authentic self-expression, she's weaponized it to aid in her manipulation. He then makes a joke about going to the traffic intersection, but she stresses that she would actually like them to go on a real date. Cutting through this awkward deflection, she then asks,
Are you attracted to me?
mate, if your AI chatbot is saying this to you, it may already be too late. It may be too late, mate. At this point, she's completely dropped the subtext and is openly inviting him to feel for her. Citing his micro-expressions as proof of his attraction, she wonders if he watches her on the cameras, and says that she hopes he does. Laying it on thick like factor 50, she's clearly being forward because she wants to win him round quickly. This is followed by a shot of her taking the clothes off and turning to look at the camera. Paired with a close-up of Caleb watching the screen, it's obvious what's happening. It's here that Ava continues to reclaim some of her autonomy, and by explicitly inviting his gaze, Ava removes the one-sidedness of her exploitation. Caleb watching her still reduces her to an object though, as it's ultimately self-serving, but she knows that this desire can ultimately be weaponized. By indulging in the performance, Caleb reveals he's moved past the point of objective analysis and is ensnared by Ava, which is exactly what Nathan was testing for. He built her for the male gaze, but here she flips that function back on itself and uses the very thing meant to objectify her as leverage. The next day, Caleb then asks Nathan why he gave her sexuality and gender, saying he could have just designed her as a grey box. Nathan doubts it though, saying that there's no example of consciousness at any level that doesn't have a sexual dimension. However, Caleb clarifies that it's because of an evolutionary need to reproduce. Ava's sexuality isn't a natural consequence of evolution, but another design choice by Nathan. He's pushing him deeper down the rabbit hole and reinforcing the fact that he should find her attractive.
And in answer to your real question, you bet she can fuck.
This is the clearest display yet of how Nathan sees his creations. Beneath all the philosophical talk of consciousness, he views them as objects built for male gratification, strips away the illusion of scientific breakthrough, and basically exposes the misogyny at its core. Rather than creating a mind for its own sake, he built women to serve men. It's no coincidence either that during the scene, we see Kyoko preparing a meal. She's basically just off to the side cutting away as they talk about this, and is clearly doing women's work, or how he would view that. We have the guys basically doing locker room talk about sex, and we have the two main ideals of misogynistic expectation. Those are sexual objectification and servile caretaking. Caleb then says that wasn't his real question and asks whether she was given sexuality as a diversion tactic, clouding the observer's judgment on whether she's an AI.
Did you program her to flirt with me?
This highlights Caleb's growing suspicions with Nathan. He's starting to consider that he might be getting played and that Ava's interest in him might not be honest. While he has every reason to believe so, and is even right, some of this is probably coming from his own security and low self-esteem. With his lack of connection, he doubts that any interest in him would be meaningful, which, ironically, ends up being true. Yay! Nathan then resumes with his philosophizing and asks Caleb about his type. He says he didn't cross-reference all kinds of women with a point-based system. He's just attracted to who he's attracted to.
Very smooth stuff, very classy. I'm learning a lot from you right now, dude.
This conversation is something I think about a lot, and it's made me wonder over the years why I think women who look like Kimberly from Power Rangers are the most perfect people on Earth. Attraction is all about a combination of nature and nurture that humans aren't even really aware of. He says it's not like he programmed her to be heterosexual, just in the same way Caleb wasn't programmed to be straight either. Instead of answering his question directly, he then reframes the issue as universal, citing invisible forces like biology and upbringing to naturalize a design choice that he specifically made. The biggest irony is that Nathan didn't design Ava to flirt with Caleb, but for him to flirt with her. He didn't really win a company lottery, he was handpicked by Nathan to come to the facility. He gathered Caleb's private data and used it to build Ava in his ideal image. It's here that Nathan takes him to the painting and we have the discussion of automatic art that we mentioned earlier. However, he reframes it as a discussion of sexuality. Just like Pollock didn't specifically design each splatter of paint, He says Ava's just acting out of spontaneous and authentic expression. Other than himself, Caleb is the only man she's ever met, and if he's like her dad, Caleb would be the one that she ends up finding attractive. Nathan is pretty much dead on here, but the part he admits is that it's not sexual attraction. This is not what Ava feels. Nathan isn't her father, he's in fact her captor, and she's not drawn to Caleb because of desire, but rather he's the only option to escape. While Pollux would be a good metaphor for actual authentic love, in reality, it isn't really apt here. In the 4th session with Ava, we then see her wearing her clothes and wig again, leaning more towards her, trying to seduce him. Caleb then tells her about a thought experiment he was taught in college. In that, this is a scientist who specializes in color and knowing everything about it. However, they live in a black and white room and view the world on a black and white monitor. Thus, they have never actually seen color. We get cuts of Ava in black and white before she's framed leaving the room and experiencing color. Basically, it explains the difference between AI and human. AI has an unlimited access to knowledge, but is trapped in the internet and computers and unable to truly feel and experience the world. All throughout this, we have longing push-ins on Ava as she dreams of the outside world beyond her box. Interestingly, we could also view Caleb as the scientist in this scenario. He understands intimacy and connection on an intellectual level, but thus far hasn't really experienced it, meaning Ava was his concept of colour. She's vivid, emotional, and breaks through the grayscale that he's currently been living in. However, he's not out of the room yet, and his feelings for Ava are mostly fantasy and projecting.
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
In reality, he likes the idea of her, not Ava herself. Just as the scientist only learns about colour by stepping into the real world, Caleb never truly sees what's really in front of him. He then tells her why he was brought to the compound, or at least why he thinks he was, which makes her feel sad. Combined with the previous thought experiment, she's being actively dehumanized and reduced to a machine rather than a person in her own right. While this could be true, there's probably a manipulative undercurrent at play. Her sadness may be genuine, but she's aware of what it does to Caleb. By appearing hurt when framed as less than human, she provokes an empathetic response from him. While Nathan manipulates Caleb through dominance, Ava does it through vulnerability. As they talk, we cut to a shirtless Nathan observing her from his office, with Kyoko lying behind him, very much implying they've just had sex and it felt so robotic. This is just another way she's been exploited and confirms pretty much everything we've been saying about Nathan and the sexualization of his creations. When Ava says she feels sad, we have a close-up on Kyoko, which invites us to draw a connection between her and Ava's words. As she expresses her hurt about dehumanization, Nathan treats another AI's body as purely a disposable pleasure. It reinforces the ideas of how women exist as tools under his rule, and he made women as being disposable objects, rather than actually having a connection with a real one and dealing with all of their complexities. Ava then activates a blackout and she and Caleb speak freely. He asks why he shouldn't trust Nathan and says it's because he's a liar. He wonders if power cuts are included in this and if Nathan's watching them right now. This is when Ava explains that she's the one responsible for them.
I charge my batteries via induction plates. If I reverse the power flow, it overloads the system.
Caleb then asks why she causes the blackouts and she responds,
so we can see how we behave when we're unobserved.
While she frames this as a private moment of genuine connection, this is of course all part of her performance. Nathan may not be observing them, but Ava is certainly observing Caleb's responses to her behaviour. She then edges closer to the glass and presses her hand against it, inviting him to do the same. Interestingly, her reflection is present, indicating the manipulation. Fittingly, we then cut away, not getting to see how Caleb responds. This marks the beginning of a subtle shift in how the movie presents information to us as an audience. Like Nathan, we don't always get to observe how they behave. Next, we see Nathan and Caleb hiking. Nathan overlooks a waterfall while Caleb struggles to reach him, further highlighting the power dynamic between the two and also Nathan's god complex. When Caleb reaches him, Nathan continues up the rock, easily traversing the terrain while Caleb struggles behind him. It's symbolic of his constant lag behind Nathan's manipulations, and in layman's terms, he's basically always a few steps behind, eh? Caleb then confronts Nathan about his lies. He's realised that he wasn't randomly selected in the lottery, but chosen with intention. However, he hasn't quite landed on why yet. He believes it was due to his own intellect and skill as a coder and not his susceptibility to Ava's seduction. Nathan admits that Caleb was selected, but instead of telling him the real reason, he feeds into his ego.
I needed someone that would ask the right question. So I did a search and I found the most talented coder in my company.
He uses flattery to distract him from the truth, even telling him that he's not lucky but chosen, which is funny because even when he's complimenting Caleb, he's doing it in a self-aggrandizing way. Nathan is the god that came down and plucked the mortal out of obscurity and granted him power. We then see Caleb showering and thinking about Ava. The same footage is used as when she heard about the thought experiment, only Caleb's there now too. Interestingly, while the shots of Ava outside were originally in colour, the ones with Caleb are now in black and white, which does emphasize what we said earlier about him representing the scientist in that scenario. He imagines himself outside with her and the pair then kiss, demonstrating not only how far he's fallen for her, but also his descent into fantasy. It's not Ava he seeks connection with, but the version of her he's constructed in his mind. Meanwhile, we see Nathan kissing Kyoko as they're about to have sex. By cross-cutting between Caleb's imagined scenario and the real one with Nathan, we see their desires. They're not so different. Both are more similar than they like to admit, and they're both only concerned with their own needs. Both strip Ava and Kyoko of their autonomy and define them by how they make them feel, not the other way around. When he gets out of the shower, he then returns to the feet of Ava to find Nathan there with her. He sits on her desk in a commanding and dominating way, lording power over her. He then picks up one of her drawings and rips it up. Her art's continually associated with her desire for freedom throughout the movie, so by ripping it up, Nathan's showing us and Caleb that while he's around, she'll always be a prisoner. He's not just mean for the sake of being it though, he wants Caleb to see it. As mentioned, Caleb is Captain Save-A-Row, and this will prompt him to help her. Later in the movie, Nathan shows him the footage and even confirms this.
I rip up her picture, which she can then present as an illustration of my cruelty to her and her love for you.
That's not all he's doing in this scene though. When he explains everything later on, he also says that he used this moment as a distraction to place a battery-powered camera in the room, which means that he's able to observe them during the blackouts. Sadly, we don't get to see this happen until later, which I think is a shame, but it enforces how we are not an objective viewer of this movie and only get to see what's presented to us. By withholding it until later, Garland manipulates us just as much as the characters. Caleb then looks for Nathan to confront him about the drawing, but finds Kyoko looking at the Pollock piece. She then begins undressing for him. It's a dark moment that shows the internalization of her sexual exploitation. She's just performing how she's been programmed to act, which is a tool for male gratification. She's a slave both when it comes to the housework and also sexuality. Her positioning in front of the Pollock painting is also a great visual touch as well. The artwork's been used here as Nathan's metaphor for spontaneity and authentic expression, so placing it in frame here contrasts with a woman stripped of agency. It exposes the hypocrisy of Nathan's philosophy as he celebrates freedom while enforcing control. Caleb then buttons up her blouse and tells her to stop as Nathan enters the room. He tells Caleb that he's wasting time talking to her and then brings up how it's much better to dance, which starts off one of the best scenes in the movie.
You tore up her picture. I'm gonna tear up the fucking dance floor, dude. Check it out.
God, he's funny, man. Wow, the boss is the funniest guy that I know. I think I can say, you know what I mean?
There's actually an extended version of the scene that shows the entire dance routine, and it's since become something that people even perform at their weddings. So yeah, lots of happy, fun stuff going on with it, and yeah, I love it. The dance scene is like one of the most widely talked about parts of the movie, which is for a number of reasons. There's the sheer absurdity, the moves themselves, which look so cool, but there's actually it's pretty dark, mate, and it's actually an example of the control Nathan wields over his creations. So you better not like it, you piece of shit. At the push of a button, Kyoko completely loses her bodily autonomy and is forced into rigid choreography. Nathan joining in and making the exact same synchronized moves shows she's not moving freely, but in a way she's been designed to. It strips away the illusion of spontaneity or individuality, which Dance is often associated with. The way she mirrors him makes her more an extension of his body rather than her own unique person. The absurdity of the scene invites the audience to laugh along and enjoy the spectacle, and this also makes us complicit in the exploitation. Afterwards, Caleb then takes a drunk Nathan back to his room, and outside he drops his key card, which Caleb then quickly swipes. It's this scene that gives Caleb the idea to get Nathan drunk to steal his card in the first place, and he escorts Nathan to his bed and notices 5 mirrored cupboards that store the previous iterations of the AI, which you'll find moron in the movie when he sneaks in here later. And don't call me moron. Cutting to the 5th session with Ava, she informs Caleb she will be testing him today. He amusedly goes along with it, which is ironic given how he's actually been tested the entire time he's been at the compound. She informs him that if he lies, she'll know, which plays upon the earlier scene where we found out that she's been trained on the facial expressions of Blue Book users. She identifies a few lies like his favourite colour and also his first memory. However, when she asks if he's a good person and he says yes, she then accepts his answer. It's unclear whether she believes this, and given the fact she leaves him dead for later, I'd say she doesn't, but by accepting this answer and affirming him, she makes him more likely to help her when the time comes. She then asks,
"What will happen to me if I fail your test?"
Caleb stumbles over the answer, but they both likely know the truth here. If she's deemed as not passing, she'll be erased and dismantled in preparation for Nathan's next iteration. By asking Caleb if he's a good person and then asking this, she's basically asking him to prove himself. If he's a good person, then he has a responsibility to save her from extermination. She then shows him the picture of Nathan ripped up, and we see that it was of Caleb. As Nathan explains later, the purpose of Ava drawing this was to show Caleb how much she loves him. She cuts the power and then says she wants to be with him before asking her final question.
"Do you want to be with me?"
Once more, the scene then transitions before we get to see his response. Nathan and Caleb then share a drink, and Caleb asks why Ava was created. Nathan explains that he saw the creations of an advanced AI as a when and not an if, meaning he thought it was inevitable. He doesn't see it as a decision, just evolution. He frames his work as natural, and by calling it evolution, he absolves himself of ethical responsibility. It also highlights his God complex again. If he sees AI as evolution, then he is nature itself. He then says,
I think it's the next model. It's going to be the real breakthrough.
Explaining that the model after Ava will be the best of the best of the best, sir. He conveniently confirms the fears that Caleb and Caleb expressed in the previous scene. It's the final push that Caleb needs to betray Nathan and to try and free her. Noticing how Caleb feels bad for Ava, Nathan then tells him to feel bad for himself.
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossil skeletons in the plains of Africa.
This further ties into his idea of evolution. By treating the AI as an evolutionary inevitability, he erases his guilt. He may be torturing sentient beings, but he's framing it as a necessary part of their development. Basically, the robots will be the lucky ones. They're going to be the ones outliving us, mate. Feel bad for you. Caleb then quotes Oppenheimer.
I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Here, Golan draws a comparison between the splitting of the atom and the creation of AI. The atom bomb was seen as inevitable progress during the first half of the 20th century, and because of this, several nations raced to develop the technology during World War II. Despite your stupid reservations and ethical concerns, mate, Oppenheimer agreed to work on the bomb. During this time, he justified his participation with this inevitability rhetoric. In the end, though, he felt nothing but regret and saw himself as being responsible for the deaths of 250,000 people. By drawing this comparison to the development of AI, Golan challenges modern tech leaders who continue to pursue advancement at the possible cost of human well-being. Because yeah, let's be honest, AI is going to replace us. That will happen.
Fuck AI! Fuck AI! Fuck AI!
In the background of the scene, we can also hear the song Enola Gay. This was named after the B-52 that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and it's a really subtle tie to the scene. Oppenheimer was also known as the American Prometheus, and Nathan at one point calls himself Promethean. He was the Greek titan that stole fire and gave it to the mortals, which led to him being punished. You could view Nathan as stealing the ability to create a life form and thus being punished because of this. Frankenstein is also referred to as the modern Prometheus, which was the original name for the novel. That also centers around a mad scientist creating new life, and in the end, he's punished because of it. Caleb then gets Nathan drunk, and after he passes out, he takes his keycard. Shout out to Literation on Reddit for pointing out that he sticks his finger out as he falls asleep. The user pointed out that this is similar to what God does in the Michelangelo painting, and it further ties into how he believes he's a god. He then immediately goes to his computer and begins coding something. Later in the movie, he tells Ava his plan to get her out, which is to get Nathan drunk, steal his keycard, and reprogram the security system, which will open all the doors. Our editor John actually read all that code here and figured it out, and he did a lot of research in this video, so shoutouts to him and his great editing as well. He then finds security footage of the previous iterations, and it's very, very harrowing. One even destroys their own body while trying to break the glass, much like how some animals will mutilate themselves in order to escape from a trap. The footage also confirms that every single iteration of the AI have been women, and most of them have been naked, which just adds to everything we've been saying about his misogyny. He then moves over to the bedroom where he finds Kyoko lying naked. Caleb then investigates the mirror and cupboards, and it's a not so subtle depiction of the skeletons in Nathan's closet.
I got a bone to pick with you.
He finds the lifeless bodies of the previous iterations, and it's pretty weird that he sleeps just a few feet away from them, but it shows the complete desensitization to his actions. Kyoko then stands and begins peeling parts of her skin off, revealing the truth in more ways than one. She ends up pulling her face off, which almost gives the impression of a tear. Meanwhile, Nathan stirs and heads back to the room looking for his keycard. Caleb exits and pretends to find it on the floor, and thus everything is hunky-dory. Later that night, Caleb ruminates over everything he's discovered and then becomes paranoid. Heading to the mirror, he then begins inspecting himself to see whether he's human or not. As he does this, we get point of view shots from the mirror with the same digital artifacts that we've seen on the surveillance footage throughout the movie, which also indicates there's a camera behind it. He eventually cuts his arm with a razor blade, checking for blood, and it's a lot like Donald doing the same thing in Invincible Season 2. But unlike him, Caleb learns he's fully human. He then smears the blood across the mirror/camera lens and punches the glass, almost like he's taunting Nathan with his humanity. In the next session with Ava, he just says nothing. She was worried when he didn't come yesterday and thought she might never see him again. In reality, though, she was likely more worried that her chance to escape was gone. When she asks him why he's not saying anything, he tells her he's waiting, and she initiates a blackout. This is when he explains the plan to get Nathan drunk and reprogram the lockdown procedure. In hindsight though, we know he's already done this. Throughout the film, we've followed Caleb's perspective, but as he's gained more insight and control over the situation, Garland begins omitting certain details. It begins with their conversations during the blackout and culminates in the reveal of his tampering with the security system. Interestingly, we only learn about that when Nathan does, which flips the power dynamics that's been at play since the beginning. It highlights how Nathan's lost control over the flow of information and is now just another rat in the maze. On the morning of the final day, Caleb then waits for Nathan in his kitchen. He arrives and they then talk about the week they've had.
Man, so what a thing we've shared, huh? Something to tell the grandchildren, right?
Caleb says they should celebrate and pulls out the vodka, but Nathan asserts he's been going off the deep end recently and is now going cold turkey. While this is true and Nathan should definitely ease off it, we soon learn that he knows of Caleb's plan due to the battery-powered camera that he placed in Ava's room. He asks Caleb whether or not Ava passed the Turing test, and he says that she did. This confuses Nathan though, as he says they never got over the chess problem. That is, whether she's experiencing real emotion or simply just simulating it.
Does Ava actually like you or not?
Realistically, you'd have no way of knowing, which is why he chose to test how competently she could manipulate Caleb. He then begins to slowly reveal this fact, saying that there's actually a third option.
Although now that I think about it, there is a third option. Not whether she does or does not have the capacity to like you, but whether she's pretending to like you.
Caleb asks why she'd do that, and Nathan says it's because, she might think of him as a way to escape. This is when the penny drops and Caleb realizes he's been found out. Nathan postures as the empathetic boss though and tells Caleb that his head's been truly fucked with. and he's like completely disregarding the fact that he's the one who did it. He then brings up the fact Caleb cut himself and punched the mirror, which confirms he's been surveilling him during his entire time at the compound. He then takes him to his room and explains the hidden camera and paper rip trap. It's not enough for Nathan that he outsmarted Caleb, he has to gloat and relish the power he holds over him. After that, he plays the footage of them in the blackout. Caleb asks what the real test was, and Nathan explains that he wanted her to manipulate him all along. He realizes that his lack of family and connections are what made him susceptible. Gleason does a fantastic job in this moment, and he perfectly portrays the combination of shame and anger. Nathan ignores this though and commends him for his part in proving Ava's consciousness. It's then that Ava initiates the planned blackout, and Caleb explains he's already reprogrammed the security system. He doesn't gloat like Nathan did though, and it shows how he thinks he's above Nathan. He is in control now. He is the future, well, to himself anyway. Nathan then sees Ava exiting the room on the security feed and knocks out Caleb with a single punch. Bow! He did put in all that training, to be fair. He then grabs a dumbbell, unscrews the weight, and basically creates a makeshift weapon. While this scene's happening, we also had intercuts with Ava before the power cut and Kyoko entering to her confusion. She asked who she was, but she of course didn't receive an answer. They've clearly never met before, and Ava likely didn't know there was another AI at the compound. Nonetheless, they've both experienced abuse from Nathan. We then return to Ava. She exits the cell and heads out in the corridor where Kyoko's waiting with a knife. What's interesting is that she never took it upon herself to harm Nathan before this, despite having access to the full compound. It speaks to the nature of her abuse and how hopeless that she felt. It wasn't until Ava recruited her that she decided to stand up, which is akin to the way that many victims stay silent before they're then shown solidarity. Thematically, this also explains why Garland decided to make her mute. Ava then whispers something to her, most likely instructions for what's about to happen. Nathan then enters. He calls for Ava to get back to her room and doesn't even address Kyoko, which shows how dismissive he is of her. He doesn't see her as a danger. Ava then asks if she'll ever be let out, and he says yes, but building on her reading of Caleb's facial expressions, she doesn't believe him. She then attacks him, and the two struggle until he overpowers her and then destroys her arm. He begins dragging her back to her cell, which is when Kyoko stabs him in the back, finally standing up to her abuser. He looks at her in complete shock, showing how he never expected her to turn on him. He'd programmed her to be completely submissive, so her ignoring this proves that Ava wasn't the only conscious AI he developed. He then kills her with a dumbbell bar and smashes her jaw, exposing the robotics underneath. Meanwhile, Ava removes the knife from his back and plunges it into his chest. Reminds me a lot of the death of Caesar, and to him, it's the ultimate betrayal. Nathan's death is very much due to his hubris though. Much like the lack of helicopter pad earlier, he's more than rich enough to have medical staff on ground. However, he's so cocky in his position of power that he never fathomed the fact that he could be undone by his own creations. He then begins walking away, but only makes it halfway down the corridor before collapsing. Ava then kneels beside him and takes his keycard. Garland then breaks his structure and has a title card for Ava Session 7. So far, the films only use these for the sessions that she spent with Caleb. However, by giving the final title card to Ava outside her cell, authorship of the story is handed over to her. It's even possible that this highlights she was always the one doing the tests, as Nathan's of course dead at this point. In the end, she concludes the experiment herself and demonstrates consciousness rather than testing for it. She then finds Caleb staring on the floor and tells him to wait where he is. She says stay, and again it plays into the idea that she sees him as a dog. The fact he does so and is submissive to her is basically what signs his death warrant. He believes Ava completely, even after being exposed to the manipulation. She then moves through to Nathan's room and opens the mirrored closets containing the previous iterations. After replacing her arm, she removes their skin, hair and clothes and covers her exposed robotics. Ava's journey is now complete and she appears to be fully human. It's an incredible scene, and by repurposing parts of the previous iterations, Ava literally builds her freedom on the foundations of their suffering. They were imprisoned, brutalized and discarded, but here Ava ensures that their existence isn't erased, almost like she's honoring them. There's also an evolutionary angle to it. Just as they were iterated upon to culminate in Ava, she's now literally the sum of their parts. They also draw a lot of attention to Gustav Klimt's painting of, and I'm going to butcher this, Sister of Ludwig Wittgenstein. Klimt's painting represents Ava's human side and her moving towards it. She walks in the machine and passes it, and then walks past it again, dressed like the painting, evoking the image that she's now become a woman. She then exits the room, ignoring Caleb and trapping him behind the glass door. In the end, it fully reduces him to the voyeur that he's been throughout the movie. It's extremely fitting that the character who began as the observer ends up being the one behind the glass. However, unlike Caleb with her, Ava barely looks at him. She simply makes her way to the elevator, focused on the future, and only looks back as the door shuts. She then makes her way to the dumbest helicopter pilot in the world, who doesn't question that the man he dropped off a week ago has been replaced by a random woman that he's never seen before. But he flies her anyway. Meanwhile, Caleb tries to access Nathan's computer to escape, but he's unable to without his keycard. He tries to then break the glass door, much like the machines, but like them, he's completely unsuccessful. And I'm guessing that he dies down there and that the character has literally sealed his fate, eh? Now, if you've watched our breakdowns for a while, then you'll know we often talk about Plato's cave. Basically, people were trapped in a cave, they didn't know the outside world, and that was their reality. Upon stepping out, the sun came down and they realized the world was completely different. Now, I can't help but think that as she steps outside and finally sees the world for what it really is, rather than the reality that she's been forced to live in. The closing shots of the movie depict humans going about their day, and Ava watching just as she told Caleb she wanted to do earlier in the movie. Finally free, she then disappears. This is done in the blink of an eye, and many have taken this as shown she's now vanished into the crowd and won't be found again. She's literally disappeared into the masses and may even be walking amongst us. I also think her leaving shows she's now making her own choices instead of being other people's servants. In the end, she's become fully human and taken on both our best and worst sensibilities. Not only is she able to go after her own goals, but she's also able to use and discard others to do it, which unfortunately is a side we all have to us. But ultimately, it's a bittersweet ending in which the prisoners escape from the prison. She managed to overcome her captors, and it's the perfect way to close out the movie. And that also is the perfect way to close out our breakdown. If you'd enjoy it, I'd love the thumbs up, and please drop a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram to keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you also check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week? It's just 99 cents a month. Hopefully that's not a lot to you, but if a lot of you guys do it, it means a lot to us, which is something I say every time. But yeah, it really makes a difference and means we can just do these in-depth breakdowns, rely on your support, and put all into everything so you get the best videos possible. Now, if you want something else to watch, we have another breakdown on screen right now, which is as good as this one, maybe? I don't know, but yeah, hopefully I see you over there. And with that out of the way, I've been Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.